In this video, we are going to show you how to do a countersunk rivet. So we've got a wee example here. We can see where we have joined two pieces of metal together by putting a rivet in place, and it is countersunk on both sides. Okay, and there's a wee example of us here when it's fully formed in place, where we've joined a piece of aluminium to a piece of brass. Before we go into any processes of actually putting the rivets into the two pieces of metal, we first of all need to countersink our metal components. So our first piece here we're going to countersink is this hole on our piece of aluminium, and our second piece is going to be this part here on the piece of copper on this side. Okay, so we'll have a wee look at that just now. Here we have the pillar drill set up with the countersink bit in place. We've got a piece of scrap wood held in the machine vise to help support our metal component ready for countersinking. We're going to go in now and countersink the first aluminium component by placing it into the machine vise, locking it in place. We're then going to go in and check we've got everything lined up first of all with the countersink bit in the hole that's been previously drilled. This one is a 3mm hole in this example. We're going to close over the guard, we're going to turn the power on, making sure it's on a slow speed. Then we're going to slowly bring the countersink bit down. And we're going to go down to about there. We're then going to stop, open up. We are then going to remove the piece of aluminium from the machine vise, and we are then going to check our rivet and see if it goes through and check how flush it is. And that is actually pretty good at that. If you need to make sure that the rivet's a bit more flush with your metal, your component, you can go back in and countersink a little bit further to get that nice shape in there, allowing the countersink rivet to sit flush to the metal. We're now going to move on to our second metal component now. This is our little copper tea-light top. We're going to place that into the machine vise again, nice and securely with a bit of scrap wood underneath. I'm then going to close the guard over again. Well, first of all, I'm going to check actually, I'm going to line up my countersink bit with the hole to begin with that we've drilled previously at 3mm. I'm going to close the guard over. I'm then going to turn the machine on. Again, coming in and drilling a small countersink into here. I'm just doing a little bit at a time to allow the countersink to drill in and clear some of the metal. I'm then going to stop there. The copper may be hot at this point, so give it a wee second to cool. You can run it under the tap to cool it down with a bit of paper towel if you need to do it a bit quicker. We're then going to remove this from here, and that's actually cooled down fine. We're now going to check the rivet fits into this one okay, and that sits flush on there. So the countersink is working well there, and it's allowing the countersunk rivet to sit flush to the top of the copper. And it's just looking nice. Okay. So we're now going to head back to our bench and finish off the riveting process. We are now going to prepare our metal components ready for riveting. Before we go any further and actually start riveting things together, we need to have a look at this. We need to address what's happened on the copper here. So on softer, more durable material, you may find as you're drilling or countersinking, you get this kind of impression forming on the other side. We need to get that nice and flat because we want our two components to go together nice and flush to each other. So we're going to place this into the vise, and I'm simply just going to take a file and I'm going to file down the top of that. As you're filing, try and put even pressure through the file, one hand on one end of the file, one hand on the handle, until that's smoothed off a bit. And that's helped to kind of make that a wee bit more level at the bottom, allowing our two pieces to go together as so, which is looking better. We're now ready for taking a look at the riveting process. We now have our two metal components here ready for the riveting process to do our countersunk rivets. So what we need for our next wee step is this. We are going to need to get ourselves some rivets, first of all, to begin with. So in here, we have a couple of different types. We've got some copper rivets, which are quite nice. You can see they've got the wee countersunk bit at the top of them there to allow them to sit quite nicely into the metal on there and on the aluminium. We also have some brass rivets here, which you may wish to use to have a bit of a contrast against the different metals in there. So it's completely up to yourselves whether you choose a brass or a copper one to match them or to contrast the two metals that are in there. Okay, that is your choice. So we're going to need to get ourselves either a brass or a copper rivet. We're going to need to get ourselves our 2 components ready. A ball peen hammer, a rivet set, some pincers, or a junior hacksaw. Our first step in the process of countersunk riveting is taking our 2 components here and then placing our rivet through one. It's always nice to have the finished side that's going to be seen and visible with the countersunk on that side, and then we're going to place it through our second component like so. We are then going to place our 2 pieces of metal onto a flat metal surface. Something like this in the vise is good. I've got some decorative features on this piece of copper here, so I need to be wary of them that I don't damage them when I'm doing this process. I'm going to lean them over the side of the vise there like so. Okay, this can be done on anvils or the back of the vise as well. We are then going to take our rivet set. I'm going to rest the rivet into the hole on the rivet set there like so. I'm then going to take my ball peen hammer and simply I'm going to give it a few taps to help set it in place, make sure everything's aligned and that the countersunk rivet is sitting flush on the base of the metal. So a few taps on there, nothing too excessive, just to make sure everything is set in place, and that's looking fine. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that there. So we now need to have a look at the length of a rivet. So this particular one here is a fine size, but the length is a bit too long for what we require. We want to eventually have the copper of this rivet hammered into the countersunk that we've drilled previously. So we need to remove a bit of the material there. That's where our junior hacksaw comes in, or our pincers. So it is your choice. You can take a set of pincers and you can come in and reduce the size where you need to, or you can take a wee hacksaw by taking the rivet out of here into the vise and cutting it down slightly. You can place a wee mark on the rivet with a scriber to help that if required. In this case here, I think I'm just going to go in with the pincers, and I'm going to line up, well, everything's together so I can help measure it in a bit better. I'm going to line up the pincers on the copper rivet there to an area where I think is best. And I'm looking for something about 5mm or so above the material. Okay, so I'm taking off a fair amount there, but I'm still leaving enough for the rivet to form and seal in place. So I've got my position there, I'm happy with that. Just going to give it a wee squeeze, pincer that wee bit off. At this stage, I'm now going to go back into the vise. I'm going to lay my project down onto here. I'm going to align it the way I wish. It may want to be this way, may want to be at a slight angle. This is the point we need to start getting your alignment correct. If you need to, you can go back in and set it again with your rivet set. It may not be necessary at this point, but it can't go wrong doing that there. Once we've got that in place, we are then going to hold it in, and being careful of fingers, we are going to come in with our ball peen hammer, and we're going to hammer on this side to begin with, just to swell the rivet to make it fit into the 2 holes a wee bit easier, or a wee bit better. So, go with that. So, already that started to swell the rivet, and it's made it a bit wider, and already that is in a position now where these 2 pieces of metal won't come together, but you can all agree this is still a little bit flimsy in there, so it's not ideal. We need to still finish off the rivet and make it look a wee bit nicer as well. So we're back into here now. We're going to hold this in place like so. Better position there to keep the fingers clear. I'm going to continue to hammer the rivet down a bit, first with the flat side of the ball peen hammer. Now it's started to swell out a bit. I'm now going to rotate the hammer around and use this side of the ball peen hammer. And I'm going to use that to help work this copper into the countersunk section of the aluminium. So now we have managed to flatten off the rivet into that countersunk section of the aluminium, and that's looking pretty good. And now you can see that the copper and the aluminium have been fixed together through that riveting process. Okay, that's not going to go anywhere. It's nice and sturdy. At this point, if you do have excess material from the rivet sitting on this section of your riveting process or this section of the metal, you can come back in there with a file and file down any excess on there. That is absolutely fine to do that to help neaten things up a bit. In this scenario here, I'm quite happy with that. I've actually maybe gone a wee bit shy on how much material left of the rivet. As you can see, there's a slight indent in there. However, that's pretty good. It's a nice strong rivet and it's not going to loosen off anytime soon. And that is how we do our countersunk riveting process.